We've been looking at the tendency of the mind to create stories. It's an all-pervasive tendency. You might think that you don't succumb to this tendency, or it doesn't apply to you. You're sort of a practical and realistic sort of person. But I think that's very, very unlikely. It's an intrinsic part of our, that might be part of your story. That might be part of your story to think that you're practical and realistic and you don't subscribe to stories. We've all got a story. In fact, we've got lots of them. Vasistha continued, having manifested in the infinite consciousness, the mind has by its own nature spread itself out. Spread itself out. There's a lot of stuff going on. There seems to be a lot of space. Just look up in the sky and you see a lot of space. And all this is the mind. It's perceived by the mind, it's apprehended by the mind. It's of the nature of mind. It can't be anything else. The mind has constructed notions of out there and of distance. By its nature, again, it makes the long appear short and vice versa, and makes one's own appear to be different and vice versa. Well, these are kind of a bit vague here, isn't it? It could be anything it's talking about. It makes the long appear short and vice versa. I mean, this is long. Now it's short. Or maybe it's talking about time. Sometimes a long time, the same amount of time can seem either long or short depending on what you're doing with that time. That might be a more convincing interpretation. And it makes one's own appear to be different. One's own what? One's own mind. We all think we've got separate minds. My mind is different from your mind. Or perhaps it makes my belongings seem different. If I've got a car, then even if it's the same model as your car, I'm going to think that somehow mine is different because it belongs to me. Even a little thing which it touches, it magnifies and makes its own. In the twinkling of an eye, it creates countless worlds, and in the twinkling of an eye, it destroys them. Well, the world disappears when you close your eyes, and when you open your eyes, the world appears again. The mind is creating all that, but maybe it's not just talking about that. The colour of the world, the flavour of the world changes with your mood. If you're in love or if you're feeling jealous, the world takes on a certain hue. We even talk about looking at the world through rose-coloured glasses. Even as an able actor plays several roles one after the other, this mind assumes several aspects one after the other. So that in that way the world changes, given that the mind creates the world. The mind changes, then the world changes. It changes from moment to moment. It makes the unreal appear as real and vice versa. It makes the unreal appear as real. Well, this is the whole thing about stories again. We've got these stories that we subscribe to and we take them as real. And whatever is real, do we take it as unreal? You might read these books of wisdom and think they have no pertinence to your reality whatsoever. And on account of this, it seems to enjoy and to suffer. Even that which it gets naturally, it grabs with hands and feet, and as a result of this false sense of ownership, suffers the consequences. Time, as changing seasons, is able indirectly to bring about changes in the trees and plants. Even so, The mind makes one thing appear to be another by its powers of thought and ideation. Therefore, even time and space and all things are under the control of the mind. This is an interesting contrast to a section earlier on in the Vasistha, which talked about the tyranny of time. But time, space are all a function of the mind. Yes, the mind makes one thing appear to be another by its powers of thought and ideation. Your opinion about somebody might change. You might think somebody's a wonderful person and then realise that maybe they're not so nice after all. A piece of music you thought was terrible might suddenly become very enjoyable. There's probably quite a lot of examples that could be considered there. Depending upon its intensity or dullness and upon the size, big or small, of the object created or influenced, the mind does what is to be done with some delay or much later. It is not incapable of doing anything whatsoever. It is not incapable of doing anything whatsoever. I wonder why it's expressed that way. We could say the mind does anything. The mind does everything. Sometimes we say the mind does nothing. There's different ways of looking at it. Pray, O Rama, listen to another interesting legend to illustrate this. So we've got another story coming up, and I suppose and this story actually talks about a king who gets hypnotized, and these stories are like hypnotized. We're hypnotized by our stories. We're hypnotized into believing them. So let's hear this story, this interesting legend.